This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I'll start from there. Good morning to all of you. So today we are going to discuss an important topic, that is cephalopelvic disproportion, CPD. So cephalopelvic disproportion. So it is very important, at least in our country, because many of the antenatal women, they don't come for regular antenatal checkups, or they come during late pregnancy, or they come even during labor, and they might not have any assessment to check for the pelvis whether she can deliver normally or not. So you have to assess the pelvis. So that is very important in our country. So you have to assess the pelvis whether it is CPD or not. So in simple terms, what is cephalopelvic disproportion? So nothing, that is the head, that is which is in if it is a cephalic presentation, the head is the presenting, that which comes out during labor. So when the size of the head is more or large than the size of the pelvis, that is cephalopelvic disproportion. So the disparity in relation between the head and the pelvis is called as cephalopelvic disproportion. So if you take an example, like if you take a teacup or something, so if you take a teacup in your house, when you drop a table tennis ball into it, it goes down, right? Or when you drop a tennis ball, it goes down. But if you take a cricket ball, what happens? It just sits on the cup and it will not go down. So you imagine the ball as your fetal head and the cup as your pelvis. So it is nothing but disparity in relationship between the head and the pelvis is called cephalopelvic disproportion. So disproportion may be either due to, so it can be due to maternal causes and the fetal causes. So first we'll discuss about the maternal causes. So in maternal causes, what happens if the mother is short stature? So what happens? All the diameters of the pelvis will be small. So a small pelvis. So when it's short stature, or in childhood, if she's having rickets, what happens in rickets? The pelvic bones will be soft, and all the bones will be soft. And due to the weight, there is a pressure on the soft pelvis. So the pelvis will get deformed. So simple deformity. So what happens? Suppose if you take the size of the cup, if you just deform the cup, what happens? Even a normal sized head will not fit into the cup. So same thing happens in rickets. So in osteomalacia in adults, and sometimes the tumors of the pelvic bones, and when there is dislocation of the hip, and in any road traffic accident, so you have to take history is very important. So what happens in road traffic accident? What happens? There is fracture of the bones. So when there's fracture of the bones, what happens? If one leg is shorter than other leg, so what happens? There will be tilting of the pelvis to compensate for the limb. So if the difference is less than 2 centimeters, the length of the leg compared to other leg is less than 2 centimeters, what happens? The pelvis get tilted so that to avoid the limb. So the pelvis is deformed there. So normal delivery cannot happen. That is in case of road traffic accident. Suppose in the case history of TB is there for the patient, you have to look for kyphosis, scoliosis. So kyphosis is nothing but anteroposterior bending of the spine. Scoliosis is sideways bending. So that will also has a problem with the pelvis. So all the history is important. History of road traffic accident, history of rickets in childhood, osteomalacia and others, and then any congenital dislocation of the hip or any congenital deformities of the sacrum and coccyx, and even tumors of the pelvic bones and any fibroids or any ovarian tumors. What they cause? They cause obstruction. So they cause obstruction. That is also CPD. So any obstruction. So these are all the general causes you have to ask in the mother. So what about in the baby? In the fetus. So fetus, what happens post-maturity? So post-maturity is one of the common causes of cephalopelvic disproportion. That is post-maturity, what happens? The baby's size will be more, so the fetal head will be larger than the pelvis. So it is very difficult to enter into the pelvis. And then in case of malpresentations, malpositions like occipito-posterior, in case of conjoined twins. And sometimes what happens if there is any difficulty in flexion of the baby, suppose if the baby is having goiter, so there is difficult infection, so that the diameter, the engaging diameter will be more and it won't get engaged. The engagement is stopped. Or in case of any deflection of head, like in case of bro presentation, so it won't get engaged. All these are common causes of cephalopelvic disproportion. And you have to ask histories. If she is a multigravida, you have to ask obstetric history. What history you want to ask? So you'll ask about any difficulty during labor, any prolonged labor, or if the doctor has applied any forceps because of difficult labor and the baby. So what happens if there is a just a tight fit of the head into the pelvis? What happens? The baby tries to push itself out by molding. I think all of you know what is molding. So normal molding is okay, but extreme molding is dangerous. So it causes all the ligamental tears and tentorial tears. What will happen? The baby will be born as a CP child. So all this history. So when you have a CP child or when there is a prolonged labor, all this will give a clue that the patient pelvis is not good. So it is a clue for the cephalopelvic disproportion previous history. So all this you have to keep in mind before taking history. You have to ask all these points. So disproportion whether due to average size baby with a small pelvis or due to big baby with hydrocephalus or due to combination of both the factors, right? Disproportion, the outlet causes perineal tears. Outlet will cause perineal tears and the head is pushed backwards as it cannot accommodate beneath the symphysis crypt. So outlet is nothing but it is a diamond shaped structure. So it has two anterior triangle and a posterior triangle. So what the head is pushed backward as it cannot be accommodate. So I think you know what is a waist space of Morris. So waist space of Morris is nothing but it is just 2 centimeters below the subpubic arch. They should be at least 6 centimeters. That is your 3 fingers. It has to accommodate. That is a normal thing. So that your waist space of Morris will be less than 1 centimeter. Suppose if your waist space of Morris is more than 1 centimeter, what happened? The head cannot be pushed out. So it is pushed backwards. And as the fetal head is the best pelvimeter. So how do you diagnose? So diagnosis of CPD is so simple. Suppose whether in your exam, if an examiner asks you, how do you want to diagnose CPD? So don't directly say that you're going to check the pelvis, putting your 2 fingers into the vagina and checking for all the sacral promontory. That is not the answer you have to give. First, you have to start from history. So you have to start from history. What history you have to ask? From the medical history. I told you what medical history: TB, kyphosis, scoliosis, your obstetric history, that is the previous delivery history you have to ask, and surgical history, any road traffic accident. So these are the first you have to ask, and then how do you diagnose? Then your first history, then your examination. So general physical examination. So your spine, you have to examine the spine, you have to examine the leg for any fractures. So all this is there. Then you have to go for the clinical assessment. Then you have to go for the clinical pelvic assessment. So in clinical pelvic assessment, so you have two types, that is the CPD at the brim. So the presence and degree of cephalopelvic disproportion at the brim cannot be ascertained by the can be ascertained by the following. You have two routes to assert, that is your abdominal method and then is abdomino-vaginal method. So abdominal method and abdominal vaginal, that is clinical assessment. Then imaging pelvimetry, that is your X-ray, that is your cephalometry, that is your ultrasound, MRI and X-ray. So ultrasound, it is done, but it will not give the measurements of the pelvis. It just gives the measurements of the fetal. That is your bipedal diameter, all the diameters. That is also important, no? How much is the bipedal? If it is normal range, then in the fetus there is no problem. So you can see any tumors of the pelvis. You can see fibroids. You can see any ovarian tumors by your ultrasound. And MRI, magnetic resonance imaging X-ray. So X-ray, you have to you have to take a lateral view of X-ray, but it is not that recommended because it has a radiation exposure. And MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, is good, but it is expensive. So, but if you have done a good clinical examination, these X-ray or MRI, they don't add much value to your clinical exam. They don't have much help. So your clinical examination is very important, as is your CPD. So I told you in previous history of obstetric history that if you're the delivery of an average sized baby, suppose average sized baby in a country, suppose 3 kgs, 3 to 3.3 kgs, if she delivers without any problem, then it rules out your contracted pelvis. But in a primary gavada with non-engagement of head, even at labor, one should rule out disproportion. So cephalopelvic disproportion is if you have examined, there is engagement of the head, there is no CPD. Simply you don't need to examine anything. Just if there is engagement is there, then CPD. If there is non-engagement of the head, then only you have to go for a clinical examination, everything. Suppose if there is engagement, there is no CPD. So I told you there is two methods, abdominal method and abdomino-vaginal method. So abdominal method, how do you do an abdominal method? So the patient is placed in dorsal position. So dorsal position, you have to know that what we examine during your OP. In outpatient department, we examine the patient in dorsal position. That is, what is dorsal position? That is your hips and knees are slightly flexed. And then you grasp the head of the fetus with the left hand. So grasp the left head with the left hand, you grasp the head, and with the right hand, with the index and the middle finger of right hand, you place your two fingers on the anterior surface of the symphysis pubis. The inner finger should touch the inner surface of this index, and the middle finger should touch the anterior surface of the symphysis pubis. So why? Because when you're pushing the head into the pelvis, you can assess the overlapping of the parietal bones. That is why you have to keep on the anterior surface of the symphysis pubis. That is your abdominal pelvis. So how you will infer? So if you can push the head down into the pelvis without overlapping of the parietal bone onto the symphysis pubis, that is your two fingers, that is your index and the middle finger, which you have put on the anterior surface of the symphysis pubis, there is no overlapping of the parietal bone. You can easily push into the pelvis, then there is no disproportion. Suppose if you, when you're pushing the fingers, there is overlapping of the parietal bone, that is you can evidence by touching this parietal bones onto your fingers, that is overlapping of the parietal bone, that it is called as moderate disproportion. Suppose you cannot push, you are trying to push, but the parietal bone is overhanging onto your fingers on the symphysis pubis, then it is severe disproportion. So why it is important? So if you take you can divide into three categories. Simply you can divide into three categories. That is, when the patient comes, if the head is smaller than the pelvis, that is, the size of the head is smaller than the size of the pelvis, then what you want to do? You will allow for the vaginal delivery, right? If the head is larger, than the size of the pelvis, what will you do? You will go for a cesarean section. So why you have to assess the cephalopelvic disproportion is because if you know it is cephalopelvic disproportion, you have an under route of delivery, that is your elective cesarean section. You pose the patient for an elective cesarean section. That is why you have to know before or the onset of, suppose if you're having a disproportion throughout the pregnancy, the patient not have any problem, right? Only the problem is during labor. That is why you have to assess before the onset of the labor, so that you can avoid complications. That is the motto behind your diagnosing of the cephalopelvic disproportion. So you have to diagnose before the onset of labor. So these are the things you can diagnose before the onset of labor. So if the head of the fetus is smaller than the size of the pelvis, go for a vaginal delivery. If the head of the fetus is larger than your size of the pelvis, then go for a cesarean section. So in between these two, you are not sure whether you can allow for a normal or whether you can allow for a section. So that is the category of the patients you allow for normal, that is called as trial of labor. That is the patients you go for the trial of labor with monitoring, continuous monitoring with the progress of the labor. That is the trial of labor. So when you do this abdominal examination, if there is no disproportion, go for a normal delivery. If it is moderate disproportion, you can go for the trial of labor. If it is severe disproportion, go for a cesarean section, right? So the abdominal method can be used as a screening method. It is difficult to elicit. So there are some problems again with this examination. That is why you have to add with your abdominal-vaginal method. So when there is deflection of the head, when it's thick abdominal wall, irritable uterus with high floating head, this method is not accurate. Then coming to the abdomino-vaginal method, that is Muller-Munrocher method. These is nothing but the name of the scientist, right? It is a bimanual examination. It is superior to your abdominal examination. So in this, you have to usually place the patient in lithotomy position is better than your dorsal position while you're doing a Muller-Munrocher method. So here, with your two hands, this is Muller-Munrocher method. So first, before doing this, you have to empty the bowels and bladder by, it will be enema, and you have to also empty the bladder. And the patient is kept in lithotomy position, and using all aseptic precautions, you introduce the two fingers of the right hand. Usually you introduce the index and the middle finger of the right hand, and you place the two fingers at the level of the ischial spines, and your thumb at the level of the symphysis pubis. And your left hand is grasp the hair. Your left hand will grasp the head of the fetus. and you try to push the fetus in a downward and backward direction, that is into the pelvis. So you can see the index and the middle finger. You put the index and middle finger at the level of ischial spine, your thumb at the level of the symphysis pubis, and the left hand you grasp the fetal head and try to push into the pelvis. Same thing. So what is your inference? When you can push the head down up to the level of ischial spines, that is engagement. That is nothing but engagement, na? So there is no there is no overlapping of the parietal bone of the symphysis pubis. That is no disproportion. Then you can go for a vaginal delivery. The head, if you can push a little, but you cannot push up to the level of ischial spines, and there is overlapping of the parietal bone. That is evidenced by your thumb. So in abdominal method, you can assess by your index and middle fingers when you kept at the anterior surface of the symphysis pubis. Here, you have put your thumb on the symphysis pubis and your index and middle finger at the level of ischial spine. Suppose your head is not touching the ischial spines, but it has pushed into the pelvis, but it is not up to the level of ischial spines, and your thumb, you can feel the overlapping of the parietal bone. Then there is slight or moderate disproportion. Then you can go for a trial of Claypot. If you cannot push the head at all inside, and instead you feel the hanging of the parietal bones with the thumb, then it is severe disproportion. That is, you have to go for a cesarean section. That is elective cesarean section, right? Next, but this also has limitations. The method is only applicable to note the presence or absence of disproportion at the brim, but not at the midlet and outlet contraction. So at the brim level, you can assess. Then the fetal head can be used as a pelvimeter to assess only the contraction, the AP diameter of the inlet, but when the contraction is the transverse diameter, it's of less use. So AP diameter it is used. Then coming to X-ray, I told you X-ray it has an exposure, but you can assess in all the planes, inlet, mid cavity, and outlet by X-ray, but it is not advisable. And ultrasound, I told you ultrasound, it is a measurement of the fetus diameter. That is usually biparietal diameter. Usually normal is 9.5 centimeter. And because this biparietal diameter is important, why? Because an engagement is nothing but the maximum diameter of the fetal head that is pushed into the pelvis up to the left ischial spines is the engagement. No. So maximum diameter of the fetal skull is your nothing but biparietal diameter that you can assess by your ultrasound. Then the MRI it is superior, but it is expensive. But when you do a good clinical examination, this will not have any added information. The average biparietal diameter is 9.2 to 9.8 at the term. Okay. MRI is also important to assess the pelvic soft tissues and fetal size, volume. That is added information you get when you do an MRI. So, degree of disproportion. Based on clinical and supplemented by imaging pelvimetry, the following degrees of disproportion are evaluated. So, severe this is by depending upon the conjugates. So, first we have discussed the clinical examination, right? Here, depending upon the conjugates, obstetric conjugate. This also you can do by clinical exam. How will you get obstetric conjugate? When you subtract 2.5 centimeters from the diagonal conjugate, you get an obstetric conjugate. Okay. So how will you diagnose the diagonal conjugate? So when you put the patient in the dorsal position, put your index and middle finger, try to reach the sacral promontory. So try to reach the sacral promontory by depressing your elbow. So you measure from the tip of the middle finger to your symphysis pubis, that is angle of the arch. That you have to measure. That is your obstetric conjugate. You subtract 2.5 centimeters from the obstetric conjugate. It is you subtract 2.5 centimeters. The diagonal conjugate is obstetric conjugate. So normal obstetric conjugate is how much? Your diagonal conjugate usually will be 12 centimeters, 12 to 12.5 centimeters. Okay, so 12.5 centimeters minus 2 is how much? Around 10 to 10.5 is your obstetric conjugate, right? So when obstetric conjugate is less than 7.5 centimeters, then it is severe disproportion. You have to go for a cesarean section, right? Coming to borderline. So if the obstetric conjugate is between 9.5 and 10 centimeters, it is borderline. Okay, both the AP diameter and the transverse diameter of inlet are reduced. So anterior posterior diameter is less than 10. Normal anterior, what is the normal anterior posterior diameter? It is 12 centimeters, right? And transverse normal AP diameter is 11 centimeters. Normal anteroposterior diameter is 11 centimeters. Obstetric conjugate is about 10 centimeters. Transverse is about 12.5 centimeters. These are normal diameters. So when obstetric conjugate is less than between 9.5 to 10, AP diameter is less than 10, and transverse diameter less than 12, it is called as borderline pelvis. So in these patients, you can go for a trial of labor. So I'm talking about trial of labor. What is it? You have to know what is trial of labor. It is conduction of spontaneous labor in a moderate. Yeah, this is very important. Moderate. You can't go for a trial of labor in a severe disproportion. So in a moderate degree of cephalopelvic disproportion, only you can go for a spontaneous labor. So if you go for a trial of labor in a severe degree of disproportion, what will happen? We go into an obstructed labor. So you will induce an obstructed labor yourself. So that is why assessment of the pelvis before the onset of labor is very, very important. So conduction of the spontaneous labor in a moderate degree of cephalopelvic disproportion is an institution under supervision with a watchful expectancy, hoping for a vaginal debut. So you have to go for a trial of labor in institution. That is, you have all arrangement for the cesarean section. In case of emergency, only you can go for a trial of labor. So what is the aim of trial of labor? A trial of labor will avoid an unnecessary cesarean section, and the trial is also conducted to test the integrity of the scar in a prior cesarean section when she goes into labor. So these are the aims. But what are the contraindications? When there is mid-pelvic or outlet contraction, don't go for a trial of labor. And presence of any complicating factors, like added factors like elderly primigravida that is more than 35 years of age, and when there's malpresentations, nothing but occipital posterior or a breech presentation, all these are malpresentation. Post-maturity, so post-maturity already the baby is compromised. The patient can have already the baby may have fast meconium also in post-mature. So don't go for a trial of labor. Post-cesarean pregnancy, preeclampsia, medical disorders like heart disease, diabetes, TB, all the if any complications are there, don't go for a trial of labor. And when where facilities for cesarean section is not available, you don't go for a trial of labor. So how to conduct a trial of labor? So labor should be usually spontaneous onset, but if fails to start even on due date, induction of labor may be done. Then oral feeding remains suspended and hydration is maintained. So don't allow oral feeding, just you maintain hydration by your IV drips. Then adequate analgesic is administered. Then the progress of labor, you have to maintain a partogram. So partogram is also a question for you. So partogram is a separate chapter. So just you have to monitor the patient prognosis, the progress by a partogram. So nothing but you have to see the dilatation and descent. So how much ideally should be the dilatation of the cervix in active phase of labor? Should be more than
1 centimeter per hour.
1.5 centimeter per hour.
1.5.
So more than 1.5 centimeter per hour, there should be dilatation. How much should be the descent? More than 1 centimeter per hour should be descent. So you have to monitor the progress of descent and progress of dilatation of the cervix. And you have to monitor the maternal health and using continuous electronic fetal monitoring. And if there is a failure to progress, you can augment the labor if there is inadequate uterine contraction by your oxytocin by amniotic. So how many adequate contractions should be there? Adequate means should be at least
3 to 4 contractions per 10 minutes.
3 to 4 contractions which are lasting for
10 minutes. 45 seconds.
45, very good, 45 seconds and 10 minutes. That is the effective uterine contraction. So if you don't get effective uterine contractions, you can augment by doing an amniotomy and ox. But amniotomy usually should be done after 3 centimeters. Don't do usually before 2 centimeters. So after 3 centimeters of dilatation, go for an amniotomy with oxytocin infusion. That is how you monitor. Then if the membranes get ruptures, what you want to do? First, do a PV examination immediately to rule out cord prolapse and note the color of the liquor. And again, assess the pelvis once more, because when the amniotic fluid is drained out, you have to assess the pelvis. That is whether the fetal head, that is the maximum bipedal diameter, is coming up to the level of ischial spines or not. Then you can assess again and then note the condition of the cervix, whether it is yielding or not. Okay. Then successful outcome will depend always on degree of pelvic contraction, the shape of the pelvis. So flat pelvis is better than android. or contracted pelvis, and parable vertex presentation, it is anterior parietal presentation, there it is good. Then intact membranes till full dilatation of the membrane is also good to have a normal vaginal delivery, effective uterine contraction, and emotional stability. You have to support the woman throughout her labor. Then what are the unfavorable features? So unfavorable features means if you see these, you have to terminate by emergency cesarean section. These are unfavorable features. So during your partogram, you have to monitor whether they are progressing, go for the vaginal delivery. If you notice unfavorable features, then terminate by your cesarean section. What are the unfavorable features? Appearance of abnormal uterine contraction. If the cervical dilatation is less than 1 centimeter per hour in active phase, and descent of the fetal head is less than 1 centimeter per hour, that is a protracted active phase. In spite of your good uterine contraction, descent is slow. And then is arrest of cervical dilatation and non-descent of fetal head in spite of oxytocin therapy. Suppose if the patient has achieved 6 centimeters of dilatation, and you have oxytocin drip, and the patient is having adequate contraction, you see after 2 hours also it is 6 centimeters, that is 2 to 3 hours the dilatation is not improving, then don't wait, you have to go for a cesarean. So maximum wait for 1 hour, 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, don't wait for much prolonged time. Then when there is early rupture of membranes, formation of caput and excessive molding. So formation of caput and excessive moldings implies what? The patient is having a severe disproportion. Okay, that means your assessment was wrong, because excessive molding is very dangerous for the fetus. So fetal distress by your CTG, when there is fetal distress, then stop your monitoring and stop your trail of labor, and then plan for a cesarean section. And how long the trial to continue? So there is no specific time period that how long to continue. All is that you have to see for the unfavorable features, and then you have to terminate. Usually there is no time limit, but some books say that you can wait for 6 to 8 hours. Okay, but there is no evidence for that. And till the maternal fetal condition is good, you can wait, right? In spite of adequate uterine contraction, if there is arrest of descent or dilatation of cervix for a reasonable period in active phase, labor is terminated by cesarean section. So when dilatation descent is not progressing for at least 2 to 3 hours, don't wait for 4 hours also. I recommend don't wait for 4 hours, maximum 2 to 3 hours. You have to terminate for cesarean section. Then how the trial of labor is terminated? So sometimes the trial of labor, 30% of the patients you see a spontaneous delivery with or without episiotomy. In another 30%, there will be delivery with difficult forceps delivery to be avoided. Then in 40% cases, you end up with a cesarean section. So this is the termination of trail of labor. So usually in a cephalopelvic disproportion, most of the times, if it is a CPD diagnosis, most of the times it is a cesarean section. Sometimes they may go for a vaginal delivery, but with very difficulty, which will have its own complications. So successful trials, healthy babies born vaginally. So successful means the baby is born vaginally, spontaneously. It can be forceps or vacuum. You give baby and mother in a good condition. That is successful trial. Failure is when you terminate by cesarean section, or you deliver a dead baby, or you deliver the dead baby, or you deliver vaginally the dead baby by craniotomy. So this is the failure of trail of labor. So what are the advantages? It eliminates unnecessary cesarean section and introduces use of premature induction of labor with antecedent hazards. So usually if she is having a previous history of a cephalopelvic disproportion, previous history of bad obstetric history, suppose if you have a no disproportionate, borderline disproportion pelvis, what you want to do? So what you want to do is you can induce premature, that is before 40 weeks. So at 37 completed weeks, you can induce. Don't wait till 40 weeks in these kind of patients. So what are the disadvantages? Most of the cases you end up with, so 30% of cases you end up with forceps or vacuum, that can be problem in that can lead to problems in the fetus, and 40% you end up with a cesarean delivery. And increase in perinatal mortality and morbidity, okay, because of asphyxia or intracranial hemorrhage when you go. So that is why when you get alarming signs, don't wait too long, go for a section. So you should not compromise the mother and the fetus. increase maternal morbidity. So whenever you allow for a trail of labor, you should never tell, no, I have allowed, I have to deliver normally. Don't do that. Always see for the baby and mother condition and then deliver. And increase psychological morbidity when trial ends with a traumatic vaginal delivery and cesarean section. That is why counseling is very important. You have to counsel the patient before. When you go for a trial of labor, you have to tell the patient that I'm not sure about the pelvis, that you can deliver vaginally, but you can give a trial. That you have to counsel the patient, and then you have to start the trial of labor. Then mid-pelvic and outlet disproportion. In clinical assessment, it is difficult to determine whether mid-pelvis and outlet ends and outlet begins. So it is very difficult. So cephalopelvic disproportion at the outlet usually defined when the biparietal suboccipital bregmatic plane fails to pass to the bispinous or AP diameter of the outlet. So bispinous diameter is maximum diameter of the pelvis. That is maximum diameter of the fetus. That is biparietal diameter is not passing to the interspine. That is bispinous is between the ischial spines. That is normal it is 10 centimeters. So when it is less than 10 centimeters, the baby cannot pass. So you can measure the bispinous diameter. And AP planes of the outlet, so anterior-posterior planes. What is AP plane? It is from nothing but from the symphysis pubis to the coccyx. That is your AP plane of the outlet. Then how do you manage? So clinical diagnosis of mid-pelvic and outlet contraction usually go for elective cesarean section. Okay. And also you can go for a vaginal delivery with monitoring. In otherwise uncomplicated cases with minor contraction, it is allowed under supervision. Same thing. You have to always monitor with a partogram. So to diagnose early diagnosis of dysfunction labor, and you can augment the labor by using oxytocin to get the adequate uterine contractions. And there is no dilatation up to 2 hours or no descent, then you have to diagnose it as arrest of labor and go for a cesarean section. So the principles of management will be rest on your cesarean section to avoid difficult forceps. Forceps is deep episode. All this is depending upon the skill of the obstetrician also. So to apply forceps, they should be skilled. So if the obstetrician is confident that she can apply forceps and deliver, then only she can apply. If she has no skill of applying forceps, don't apply, because you will do more harm to the baby. Go for a cesarean section. Suppose the baby is dead, then you have to go for a craniotomy. Instead of delivering a dead baby by a cesarean section, go for a craniotomy. Sometimes some people do symphysiotomy and then ventoso. So, but no, I myself have not seen symphysiotomy. Okay, it is very rarely done. So this is a very important topic. So I just want to summarize at last. Simply, suppose if the patient is have no disproportion. No disproportion is simply that the size of the pituitary is smaller than the size of the pelvis. You can allow for a vaginal delivery, that is cephalopelvic. There is no disproportion. Suppose if there is size of the pituitary is larger than the size of the pelvis, then you have to go for a cesarean section. That is your elective cesarean section. So when you want to do an elective cesarean section, you should not wait till 40 weeks. You have to wait. You have to do elective cesarean section at 37 completed weeks. That is at 38 weeks, you do a cesarean section. Why? Because when you want to wait till 40 weeks, sometimes the patient can go into spontaneous labor. That you don't want, right? And because when the patient goes into spontaneous labor, it will have again its own complications. So don't allow for spontaneous labor. When the baby is mature, 38 weeks, that is 37 completed weeks, go for a cesarean section. And when the fetus head is larger, that is you go for elective cesarean section. So in between, you are not sure, that is in between scenario, you go for a trial of labor. So by continuous monitoring, you have to go for trial of labor. That is the thing. So cephalopelvic, I think everybody have got an idea what is CPD. Please go, please read in your Datta and those two books you read, and then try to answer some questions which will be put in the WhatsApp group, right? Thank you. Didn't questions? Yeah, theory class. Okay. So just go home and read. Okay. థ్యాంక్ యూ.
Thank you.
ఎంతసేపు చెప్పాను నేను?